Vladimir Putin's doors to Europe are officially closing. The EU is shutting down visas for Russians. The shadow fleet is trapped in the Baltics, and Putin's biggest asset, energy companies, are being taken over by Europe. Now, even his last allies, from Europe to Asia, are abandoning him. Remember those arrogant winter days when Vladimir Putin threatened to freeze all of Europe?
И вообще не будем ничего поставлять, если это противоречит нашим интересам, в данном случае экономическим. Ни газ не будем поставлять, ни нефть, ни уголь, ни топочный мазут, ничего не будем поставлять.
Especially that major blackmail targeting Germany, claiming its industries would collapse without Russian gas and oil. Putin had held the energy tap like a gun to Europe's temple. Today, that weapon is gone. That blackmail has officially failed. Moreover, that weapon has now turned around and is aimed squarely at its owner, Vladimir Putin himself. Putin's energy gateway to Europe, that bridge he trusted so much, has not just closed. That bridge has been dynamited by the Europeans themselves and blown up in Putin's face. And beneath the wreckage of that bridge lies the entire energy empire Russia has built over decades. Now, Russian oligarchs are experiencing a massive wave of panic in the heart of Europe, stretching from Berlin to Belgrade, from Sofia to Bucharest. This collapse is so great, the backlash from the blackmail so severe that even Putin's most loyal friends, his closest allies like Serbia and Hungary, his strongholds in the Balkans, are fleeing him like the plague. What you see here is the Lukoil refinery in Bulgaria, the largest in the Balkans. So, what are these images? The Bulgarian government has officially deployed military police against this refinery on its own territory. Not just police, but according to Reuters, drone defense systems have also been deployed in the area. Why? Is a terrorist attack expected? No. The situation is much more complex. Bulgaria is preparing to nationalize this giant facility owned by the Russians in order to protect its own national security. So why has Bulgaria decided to seize one of Putin's biggest assets? This is where the incident turned into a continent-wide panic. The answer is simple: a perfect legal trap set in Washington. This trap forced all European countries, and even Putin's so-called allies, into an impossible choice. The first option: continue working with Russian companies and commit economic suicide with US sanctions. The second option: seize Russian assets immediately, nationalize them, or sell them to survive. As you can see, everyone without exception is choosing the second option. A domino effect has begun, and this effect is demolishing Putin's entire stronghold in Europe. The first and most audible result of this trap began at the heart of the European Union. Russia's energy giants Gazprom, Rosneft, and Lukoil suddenly found themselves tainted. The first domino was Bulgaria. The situation was a matter of national security for Sofia. If 80% of the country's fuel depended on Lukoil, this meant that the country would run out of fuel within weeks once sanctions were imposed. Chaos, riots, and a stagnant economy were inevitable. What did the government in Sofia do? According to Balkan Insight, they passed a legislative amendment through the committee in just 26 seconds. This law grants the state the authority to seize the Lukoil refinery and sell it to a new owner. That's why the refinery was surrounded by military police. What was Russia's reaction? Ambassador Mitrofanova spoke to the TASS news agency. She said, "This looks like a property expropriation law. The Bulgarians are taking a very risky step. They are setting a dangerous precedent." A dangerous precedent? Absolutely. But it was Putin's invasion of Ukraine that created this precedent. The Bulgarians chose their country's fuel security over Putin's friendship. What does this show the Russian people? It shows how Putin's grand strategy can turn even his closest allies into enemies in an instant. Putin's image as a reliable partner is being crushed under the boots of the Bulgarian police. But this is not limited to Bulgaria. The dominoes continue to fall. Berlin is considering fully nationalizing the massive Schwedt refinery, which supplies 1/5 of the country's fuel and is controlled by Rosneft. This facility has been under state administration since 2022, but now they are considering seizing it permanently. Why? Because they fear the facility will face financial collapse when the USD trap is triggered. Meanwhile, Romanian Energy Minister Bogdan Ivan has explicitly stated that they need to take control of Lukoil's Romanian subsidiary, Petrotel Ploiesti. Same story. Securing national fuel supplies. You see it, don't you? Bulgaria, Germany, Romania. All at the same time, seizing Russian assets because of the same legal trap. Putin's energy stronghold in Europe is collapsing completely. This legal trap didn't just create a wave of seizures in Europe. It also exposed a deep rift among Putin's so-called allies. The two different responses to this trap show how Russia's influence in Europe is being shattered. On one side is Slovakia. Traditionally dependent on Russian gas, Slovakia saw the danger and immediately found a way out. The words of the Slovakian president are very clear. "I am delighted to accept the Polish president's offer, which will enable alternative gas supplies to Slovakia through the interconnection of our systems." What does this mean? It means we will no longer be hostages to Putin's energy weapon. We have prepared our plan B with a reliable NATO ally. This is a strategic loss for Putin. And then, on the other side, is Hungary. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is the leader most reluctant to act against this trap. Despite all the warnings from Washington and Brussels, Orbán continues to deepen energy ties with Moscow. US Ambassador Matthew Whitaker explicitly warned Budapest, Hungary should not be exempt, and they are not taking active steps to reduce their dependence on Russian crude oil. They were even warned that the pipeline supplying oil to Hungary will not remain open indefinitely. So what is Orbán's plan? It was not to change course, but to seek a shield by meeting with former President Trump to protect himself from the sanctions regime. In fact, according to a BBC report, Orbán had managed to secure a one-year exemption from his ally Trump. This situation shows how Orbán is becoming increasingly isolated within European energy policy and is relying on political maneuvers rather than strategic ones to survive.
So you would say that Ukraine cannot win that war?
Miracle can happen.
Yeah, that's right.
See? Putin's policy is forcing his neighbors to either flee from him quickly or become international pariahs alongside him. Both scenarios show that Russia's influence in Europe is over. But the real drama is unfolding in a country caught between these two extremes. Serbia, which Putin sees as his stronghold in the Balkans. Serbia is officially trapped because of its loyalty to Putin. The problem is this. Do you know who owns more than half of the shares in NIS, Serbia's national oil company? Russian state giants Gazprom and Gazprom Neft. What did the US restrictions say? You cannot do business with Gazprom. This is a complete disaster for Serbia. The BBC's report from Belgrade summarizes the situation clearly. As soon as the restrictions came into force, Serbia's lifeline was cut off. Because Serbia is a landlocked country. It used to get its oil through the Janaf pipeline coming from Croatia. Due to the sanctions, Croatia cut off this oil flow. Because the buyer in Serbia belonged to Russia's Gazprom. Look at these images taken at gas stations in Belgrade. American credit card giants Visa and MasterCard suspended transactions at NIS and Gazprom stations in Serbia. People want to buy fuel but cannot pay. BBC says that 1 in 10 customers, especially foreigners, cannot pay. Can you imagine? The price of loyalty to Putin is that your credit card is not accepted in the middle of Europe in the 21st century. Serbian Energy Minister Dubravka Đedović-Handanović says time is running out. It is reported that the crude oil to be processed at refineries will run out by the end of November. President Vucic is in a state of complete panic. Serbia now faces an impossible choice. Either sever all ties with Putin to survive economically and take control of the national oil company, or remain loyal to Putin and face economic collapse. And it seems Vucic has made his decision. Look, this is a very recent development. Serbian President Vucic had a phone call with Ukrainian leader Zelensky. The topic was working on regional security. Do you know what the same Vucic said after the European Commission's report that Serbia was lagging behind on its path to the EU? Serbia may change its decision to reject sanctions against Russia. I think it is important to do everything to ensure Serbia's progress on its European path. This is the moment when Serbia is finished for Putin. Serbia, which Putin sees as his ally and his stronghold in the Balkans, is forced to abandon Putin because of the US's legal trap. The following words from the Serbian energy minister to the BBC should cause an earthquake in Moscow. NIS's share in Gazprom Group's total revenue is insignificant. NIS is not vital to Russia's energy sector, but it is very important to Serbia. In diplomatic language, this means, we are a small pawn for you, but we mean everything to us. And we will not sink because of your senseless war. So, is this collapse limited only to Europe and the Balkans? No, this is just the beginning. Remember Putin's grand plan, that if the West won't buy from us, we'll sell to the East. China, India, Turkey. That plan is now falling apart. Let's start with the biggest buyer, China. According to reports by Bloomberg and Rystad Energy, China's state-owned refiners Sinopec and PetroChina have halted Russian oil purchases. Small private refiners are also not buying because they fear sanctions. The result? About 45% of Russia's oil exports to China have been affected by this buyer strike. Russian ESPO crude oil has been included in the boycott. The second largest buyer, India. Giants such as Mangalore Refinery, HPCL Mittal Energy, and Reliance Industries have suspended Russian oil purchases following sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil. Look, this is not an analysis, this is data. As Russia's oil exports to India collapsed, Saudi Arabia stepped in to fill the gap and offered price discounts to Indian buyers. India used to purchase 65% of Russian oil imports and has now halted all purchases as of December. And Turkey. According to Reuters, Turkey's largest refineries are also rapidly moving away from Russian oil. Azerbaijan's SOKRA-owned Stare refinery has significantly reduced its share of Russian oil and has urgently started purchasing from Iraq and Kazakhstan. Tuprash is increasing its purchases of non-Russian crude oil, even buying oil from Brazil and Angola. Why? Because Tuprash wants to continue exporting fuel to Europe. Putin's Asia strategy collapsed with a single legal move by the US. So, is it over? No. The most painful blows for Putin are yet to come. The country Putin sees as his most important partner in the South Caucasus, Azerbaijan. When you put these two pieces of news together, you can understand the disappointment Putin must be feeling in the Kremlin. The first piece of news is that Russian oil is no longer allowed to enter the port of Baku. Russian oil must now be sent via pipeline to Novorossiysk for tanker exports. The second news item is that the Azerbaijani army is officially abandoning Russian and Soviet standards and switching to NATO standards. While receiving the NATO delegation, Ilham Aliyev said, "Baku is in close cooperation with the Turkish army and the defense ministries of other NATO countries." This marks the end of Russia's influence in the South Caucasus. The tragicomic aspect of this is that as Azerbaijan joins NATO, Russian Defense Minister Shoigu made the following statement. The situation in the South Caucasus has also become much more stable. This is largely thanks to Russia's efforts. This is proof that a regime completely detached from reality cannot see that its allies are abandoning it one by one. Putin and his entourage are lost in the echo chamber they have created. Now the European stronghold has fallen. The so-called allies have fled. The Eastern market is closed. So, who is footing the bill for all these losses? This is where we come to the striking data we saved for last. Namely the direct impact of the disaster on the Russian people. What happened when Putin's "we'll sell to the East" plan collapsed? Right now, floating in the world's oceans, loaded onto shadow fleets, with no buyers, condemned to uncertainty, are exactly 380 million barrels of Russian oil. There are no buyers, and that's why prices are collapsing. Russian oil is currently being sold for less than $20 per barrel below the international Brent oil price. Despite Russian censors attempting to remove these headlines from the front page, the reality is this. Putin is forced to sell his oil at rock-bottom prices to finance his war machine, yet he still cannot find buyers. The reports we have clearly state that Russian oil export revenues continue to decline rapidly. Russian giant Lukoil has suspended operations at the profitable West Kurna 2 oil field in Iraq. So, what do all these figures tell ordinary Russians? There was that stability contract Putin offered them. Don't get involved in politics and I'll provide you with prosperity through oil revenues. That contract, along with those 380 million barrels of oil, is sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Those billions of dollars that are disappearing were the Russian people's pensions, their healthcare system. It was infrastructure investments. Now, all that money is either trapped in tankers in the ocean or burning away in the insatiable needs of the war machine. This economic cancer is rapidly spreading to the industrial heart of the country. In our previous analyses, we discussed how the Russian steel industry or railways collapsed, but that collapse is no longer just a profit and loss statement. It is a death sentence for mono-towns, single industry cities like Magnitogorsk, Chelyabinsk, or Tula, whose entire existence depends on a single massive factory. When Russia cannot sell its oil in the ocean, these factories cannot survive either, because the war economy has cannibalized the civilian economy. Factories need state subsidies to continue producing steel or coal, but the state coffers are no longer filled with oil money. The result? Factories declare mandatory unpaid leave, halt production lines, and suddenly leave tens of thousands of workers on the street in the middle of winter with no income. This situation creates a lost generation. When those factories shut down, the workers' skills become worthless. This situation could lead to an explosion of alcoholism, crime, domestic violence, and, most importantly, that silent but deep anger towards the regime in the Russian provinces. Putin promised his people a great and powerful Russia. But what he has delivered is an isolated, bankrupt, and internally divided country that even its closest allies are fleeing like the plague. The Russian people are paying the price for their leaders' decisions, not only on the front lines, but now directly in the economy, in empty refrigerators, and in the loss of global prestige. Putin's propaganda says, "We are at war with the West." But the data screams the truth. The whole world is fleeing from us. This huge gap is Putin's greatest weakness. Now, let's look at the big picture. Putin's energy superpower doctrine is officially dead. This ingenious legal trap set by the US wiped out Putin's entire energy empire, built over decades in European and global markets, without firing a single shot. Countries like Bulgaria and Romania have severed their last economic ties to Putin and seized his assets. So-called allies like Serbia, realizing they are about to pay for their loyalty to Putin with economic collapse, are desperately seeking refuge in the West. Major buyers like China, India, and Turkey are fleeing this toxic asset, leaving Russia isolated in the global market. Neighbors like Azerbaijan, seeing Russia's weakness, are moving closer to NATO, even militarily. The energy weapon Putin used to hold Europe hostage has now backfired and exploded in his own hands. This is Putin's strategic bankruptcy. Putin promised his people a great and powerful Russia, but what he has delivered is an isolated, bankrupt, and internally divided country that even its closest allies are fleeing like the plague. The Russian people are paying the price for their leaders' decisions, not only on the front lines but now directly in the economy, in unsold oil floating in the ocean, in empty refrigerators, and in the loss of global prestige. Putin's propaganda says, "We are at war with the West." But the data screams the truth. The whole world is fleeing from us. This huge gap is Putin's greatest weakness. Screen fades to black. So, what do you think about this? Could this global energy blockade spell the end for Putin? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.